Can you hear me okay though?
Yeah.
Okay.
So good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to introduce you to co-founder, CEO at um, EVQLV, AI and Drug Discovery, Andrew Satz. So welcome, Andrew.
Thank you so much for having me. By the way, it's pronounced evolve.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's totally
Thank you.
fine. I mean, it's a very common mistake, and I'm happy to explain to you where our name comes from.
Okay, yes. Well, that would be great. Um, so we'll get into that into the interview. But Andrew, obviously, firstly, congratulations on all your achievements. So can you please share with us more about how your entrepreneurial journey started?
Sure. So, sorry, give me just a second.
Oh, that's all right.
Um, so I've been a sort of an entrepreneurial in some manner, shape, or form, most of my life.
Yes,
And but in 2015, my partner Brett and I were studying data science at Columbia University.
yes,
My partner had left a pretty lucrative job in the finance industry to learn data science because he saw how it could change his life and the future.
yes,
And I was juggling a full-time job in healthcare risk management with a full-time graduate program, and I was basically learning data science for the same reason. Um, what started out for us as a way to become more valuable in the workforce became transformed into a passion really to change the future.
yes,
I should rewind a few years. My mother has been sick since I was a child. I mean, watched how multiple sclerosis, mental illness, cancer, and the adverse effects of medication
yes,
have really
yes,
devastated her, and the trauma it caused the people who loved her. Um, my partner was about to become a new father and learned in 2016 that someone he loved very dearly had cancer, and he really felt felt the fear of losing someone that he loved
yes,
very deeply. And so while we both had lucrative opportunities to join tech or finance when we finished our graduate degrees, the health of our loved ones was really part of that shared vision.
yeah.
And so we really wanted to use the data science tools that we were learning to have a broader impact on the health of humanity. So rather than take jobs, we started the journey together as entrepreneurs, founding the predecessor to Evolve, which was a data science healthcare consulting firm. Um, you know, it wasn't really that easy because most people know little to nothing about data science or AI, quote unquote.
No, and
Um,
the people are very confused by it.
Correct,
Yeah,
absolutely. And
yeah,
so explaining the value of what it can actually do rather than the hyperbole was one of the challenges.
yes,
The second was getting data. And we were focused on AI for healthcare. And the healthcare industry has actually some of the highest cybersecurity incidents of any industry.
yes,
And on top of that, you have all the protections of the data, especially healthcare data. So very few organizations allowed anyone to see their data. And if you know anything about AI, data is the lifeblood of teaching machine learning. And so as a
absolutely.
result, as part of we were working with a bunch of different organizations, but it was slow going. We also started helping out, working with a small biotech that developed radioactive pharmaceuticals. And we, as part of, in addition to doing the AI stuff, we started actually, because I have a background in business operations and my partner has a background in finance, really started to help the small pharma company become strategically, operationally, financially sound while learning everything we could about developing drugs and thinking about ways we could apply AI to the myriad of challenges in pharmaceuticals.
Yes,
And we're doing consulting projects that were healthcare focused, like building drug price predictions for doctors, because doctors don't know how much the drugs are going to prescribe patients are going to cost, or
yeah,
teaching machine learning to teaching machines to read medical images. And we really were learning all about the flow. I mean, I was in the healthcare risk management, so I already knew about it. But we went deeper into all the flaws and challenges and failures in healthcare and health and in pharma. And so one day in 2018, the animals actually need to be killed to discover one possible drug. And so
yes,
that day, right after we had that meeting, I spoke to my partner and I said, you know what, we can actually build a way of doing this computationally and really help accelerate delivering healing to people in need. And so, we realized we could overcome that health data challenge because there's an incredible amount of public data that could be used to build AI to design and develop drugs. It's not really, it's not private patient data. It's just biological data. And we wanted to construct something that could basically mimic the discovery process while accelerating the speed and reducing the failures. That was really our target about what we wanted to do. So we
Yes.
set about building the AI, all the while learning everything we could about antibodies, computational biology design. And within about a year, we created our first computationally designed antibodies. I mean, and this was all achieved without the traditionally long, expensive, failure-ridden process, and without the need to experiment on animals directly. I mean, we indirectly they needed to experiment on animals because where the data came from. But more importantly, what we had created was a really highly scalable and repeatable process. And so we had gone from this consulting in healthcare with AI to building our own AI, and had serendipitously launched a pharmaceutical company, and that's how Evolve was born.
Wow, that's amazing. So Evolve obviously is a technology startup leveraging AI, which you've obviously touched on. So can you please share with us more about this and give us some insight into like what the company does, in more detail, if that's possible?
Yeah, for sure. So what we do is I'm going to give you sort of like a short and skinny about the pharmaceutical industry, right? So,
Yes.
Okay. So there are, from a 50,000 foot view, I mean, there's a lot of complexity here, but there are basically drugs break down into two general areas: small molecules and biologics. I mean, there's more variety to it, but we'll just use those. Small molecules refer to anything that was chemically generated. So you think about like aspirin or chemotherapy, right? And biologics, although they're also chemically generated, but they're called biologics because they come from living things.
Yes.
So you think about like insulin, right? Insulin comes out of your pancreas, right? And so the injectable insulin is a biologic, right? Because it's right? Or antibodies, which you've probably been hearing a lot about recently because of the coronavirus. Those are also biologics.
Yes.
And so because they're generated by the body as a way to fight disease. And so we're focused on using AI on biologics, and more specifically, currently, the way that our company's focus is around antibodies.
Yes.
We use AI to develop antibodies. And the way that we do this is through a bunch of computational processes that it's not necessary to get into, but we're really focused on, there are multiple steps within getting a drug into the market, which is estimated to cost around $2.5 billion and takes about 12 to 15 years. And part of the reason it's so expensive because it's a really, really high failure rate. Like pharmaceutical, and the failure rate in pharma is like over 90%.
Yes.
So, and the process is actually kind of long and complex. That 12 to 14 years includes target discovery. So I'll use coronavirus as an example. So target discovery means like we need to determine that people actually have the coronavirus and the target is the coronavirus. So like cancer, there's so many different types of cancer, you have to determine the target. So that's really the first step. Then the second step is the drug discovery portion and the drug's development portion. So drug discovery and development. So you discover a drug and you've got to make sure that it can work inside of a human. So you do a bunch of laboratory tests. So that's the discovery and validation optimization part. That takes about 4 to 5 years in biologics. Costs us about $500 million because of all the failure that happens. Then you move into animal studies in preparation of doing human studies. And generally you have 3 phases of human studies. The first stage is the safety phase. The second phase is the sort of validity stage and efficacy stage, and then the third stage is like it's the pivotal trial that shows that it's actually that efficacy distributes across a large group, and then you get and then you have to go through the regulatory process to get approval, and then you're approved, and now you can start selling the drug.
Yes.
So we're focused on the discovery portion, right? The second part 2, discovery and optimization. That's where we sit today. Yes. And what we do is we use our technologies to discover novel antibodies. And we work with our collaborators, which are either clinical research organizations. They're companies that actually provide research services to pharma companies. Or we work with biotechs. So this could be small to medium-sized pharmaceutical companies that are working on new drugs for a particular disease target. We can work with university researchers or public institutions like the NIH, where we can collaborate with them to help them discover and accelerate that 4 to 5 year process that costs $500 million, and we can get that done in less than a year and less than $10 million, right? So we can help them develop that. We can work with commercial stage companies to develop novel biologics, and we're also working on and developing our own internal pipeline of drugs on our own to be able to, if there's diseases that we want to go after, that maybe we think that there might be a way for us to help individuals, because the goal of our company is really to accelerate the speed at which healing reaches those in need. And I should point out to you what we mean by those in need, healing reaching those in need. When somebody gets sick, it's not just the person who is sick that's actually impacted by the disease. It's all the people that love them, right? We're all going to die. And when we die, we're not going to know we're dead, but the people that love us, they're the ones that are left. Right. So when we say we want to accelerate the speed at which healing reaches those in need, it's not just the person who's sick, but it's all the people that love them as well.
Exactly.
So
and it's also the after effects, right? The long-term
I'm sorry?
I say it's also the long-term after effects of, for those that have been left behind. So
correct. And also, the fact of accelerating and lowering the failure rate means that we're lowering the cost. Remember that part of the reason pharma is so expensive is because of the really high failure rate. 90% of the drugs that are started never make it to market.
No.
Which means that there's a lot of money spent that doesn't go anywhere. And so we feel that if we can really lower the cost and accelerate the speed, we can significantly reduce the cost of drugs getting into the market, which, aside from worrying about your loved one, I mean, I hear your accent. You're obviously not from the, but in the U.S., that it's very expensive for medication, and part of that has to do with the cost. A significant part of it has to do with the cost of developing these drugs. But we feel like if we can shorten that development time and shorten the cost, we can actually really reduce the expense to the patient, because they don't really need to be thinking about, on top of all the things that they have to deal with being sick, or a family member being sick, worrying about whether or not they can afford it. Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, South Africa, which is where I'm originally from, has the same problem, because a lot of the drugs that do come out of, come to South Africa are from the United States, or from obviously bigger international pharmaceutical companies. And the problem that South Africa has is that it's similar to the US in the sense that if you don't have medical insurance, then you end up not getting the treatment, or if you choose to bring it in, if it's approved by the medical council in South Africa, as just example, you actually end up having to find the funds, because the medical insurance companies won't cover those costs. So I understand the cost of pharmaceuticals. It's extremely expensive and ridiculous.
Yeah, and if we wouldn't have done, I shared our entrepreneurial story, but I think that if we would have just come at it right into pharma and not had that background about thinking about drug pricing at the point of care, or, I had worked in insurance, I don't think we would have really been thinking about this, right? So our backgrounds really facilitate how we think about the industry as a whole. And although we're focused on discovery and design of drugs now, we really want to not just look at the application of computational sciences just to drug discovery, but also how can we use this to do other things? Like, can we optimize animal studies so we reduce the number of animals that are being killed in laboratory studies? It's much more a humanitarian way of designing and developing drugs. We think about how the cosmetics industry moved away from that, the pharma industry potentially. I mean, if we can, this obviously is a big leap, because really there's a huge change in the way that not only the scientific community thinks, but the regulatory community thinks as well. So how do we build stuff that proves that it works? And there's always that resistance to change. So
absolutely, especially in the medical and pharmaceutical industry. So what would you say have been some of your biggest lessons during your career?
Oh, wow.
And probably there's many, but what stands out for you?
Well, I would say I've had a lot of big lessons.
Yes.
But I think I think the one of the most important lessons that I've learned is that the amount the steps you take are more important than the leaps you take.
Yes.
What I mean by that is that, like, you know, if one is envisioning however they envision themselves in the future, um, having the idea to say like jump from 0 to 100 is not is not an ideal way to try to do things, to sort
No.
of have that. And so, and it's more about the steps you take. So we actually have something that we've built into our organization that is 5 tasks a day, right? Which is to say, write down every day our team member, everyone on our team, and they do this individually. No one's telling them to do this. It's all done individually. It's sort of like a self-management way. It's like, write down 5 tasks that you want to get done that day for the organization. And these are all manageable tasks. It's not like, you know, discover an antibody, right? Like, that's not a task. It's like, you know, for me, like, I can give you some of my tasks that I have today. It's like, you know, edit a contract, right?
Yeah.
And it's a task that I can get done today, right?
Yeah.
So we do this 5 tasks a day thing. And so, and at the end of the day, we write down, you just put it, we have a win-loss column. Did we win? Did we lose? And remember, it's self-management. So one is deciding their own tasks that they want to do that day. And you just write down whether you got it done or whether you lost, meaning win or lose. Did you win, right? Did you finish it? Sort of like a check mark.
Yes.
And if you lose, why did you lose, right? Was it that you put too many tasks down, or you didn't break the task down into small enough pieces? You got distracted by a personal event? It doesn't really, like, the reason why it happens is not so much as important as in the tracking what you did so that you could update, learn from it. But if you think about that, 5 tasks a day turns into 25 tasks a week, turns into 100 tasks a month, turns into 1,200 a year, assuming you don't take any time off, which I don't. But I mean, let's say you take a month off. That's still 1,100 tasks a year. And even if you only got half of those done, you got somewhere between 500 to 600 tasks done for this goal that you have, right? So as opposed to trying to just say, hey, I want to get to the goal, breaking it down into smaller pieces that every single day you're doing something towards it is for me like an important lesson, I think, that I take away from it. I think that there's one other big lesson that I learned, and these are probably more, you know, I was practicing for a long time and I didn't really think about it, but it has to do with the ways that we learn things.
Yes.
So I was listening to someone talk, and it was sort of like popped into my head. It was like these 4 stages of the way we learn things, right? We could take a game, right? You and I start playing poker or whatever. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. Or basketball. Okay. So the first stage is just you win because you're lucky.
Yes.
Right? You're playing against people. You're not following the rules. You don't know what the rules are, and you're playing with everybody, and no one knows what you're doing because you don't know what you're doing. Yeah. And you win because you're lucky. That's beginner's luck, right? Yeah. Right. Stage 2 is when you're learning. You're trying not to get things wrong. You're just trying not to make a mistake. Yeah. You're trying not to mess up. Stage 3 is you try to learn from your losses or learn from your mistakes. This is where most of the world generally sits right now. That's why I always say, people say that failure is the best lesson. Yeah. Agree. And then the stage. Say again?
I say agree with that.
Yep. But that actually forgets that stage 4 is actually learning from your wins. Yeah. So what that means is, did you win because you were lucky? Did you win because you're skilled? Or did you win because you were just better than the other person? Right? Yeah. And this is why the great athletes still practice a lot. I mean, they're winning all the time, but they're still practicing. I'm a basketball fan. Yeah. And Steph Curry, who plays for the Golden State Warriors, is arguably the best 3-point shooter of all times. Arguably, right? Like, you can get into a debate, but you could argue that he was the best. He still does 100 3-point shots every time he goes into, and at least that's what I'm told. He still does 103-point shots every time he goes into practice. This is arguably the greatest 3-point shooter. So the thing is that part of the reason I say that I think it's a fallacy to just say failure is the best teacher. If you're winning, let's assume you win half the time and you lose half the time. That means you're leaving aside 50% of the learning.
Yes, of course.
Right? Like, so this is why, like, obviously failure is a great teacher, but so is success.
Yes.
If you really take the time to analyze your successes.
Absolutely.
So that I think that those are probably the 2 lessons that I would think are important for me, at least, to think about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it makes a lot of sense. So, obviously you're a data scientist by training and previously founded other startups. So was this something you always knew you wanted to do? And what are some of the best startups you've been part
of? I don't know that this is necessarily like, I had never really thought about being an entrepreneur. I was just always entrepreneurial. So like one of my first jobs, I was a waiter, and I always thought of the tables as like my property when I was there. I treated them like that I owned them.
Yes.
I do really feel that there's sort of like these, and it's something we think about in terms of how we organize our company, that there's sort of basically 3 general types of individuals in an organization. I mean, like, obviously there's a lot of diversity of humanity, but in terms of like organization, like how we organize our company, is that there are people who are innovators. So, or these are people who are like entrepreneurially minded. They have artistic design, sort of like connect the dot kind of people. There are tacticians. So these are people who are really good at analyzing things and really good at planning things. And then there are implementers. These are the builders, right? These are the people who really build things. Now, obviously, I think there are some overlaps, but we generally fall, like, I think people generally fall like heavily into one of those 3 areas, right? You might be like 60% innovator and 40% implementer, right? Or something along those lines. But I really think that, like, forming your teams around that. I really consider myself to be someone who is always really think like an innovator, have that innovative mentality, and artists, entrepreneurs, designers. That's really often where that falls into place. I'm innovator with a slice of tactical planning, right? Thankfully, my partner is actually like a implementer and builder, and with a slice of tactical and planning. So we have this Venn diagram overlap, and I think that complementary set is really what makes us good partners. So that's probably where I think why, like, when you say like, have I really thought about it? I think I'm like innovative minded, so that it just sort of, it's something that just the nature of who I am. And so I'm not sure, did I?
That answers the question. That's fine. So there is so much going on around AI, and especially now that we are in a global pandemic. As we have all seen, the lack of speed with governments and organizations. So do you believe that this has accelerated the use of AI technology in the medical field? And what do you still believe to be challenging or challenges using this type of technology to solve the many problems within the medical industry?
So I think one of the biggest challenges is sort of the demystification of what AI is.
Yes, for sure.
There's this really great quote by an economist named Theodore Levitt, and he says that no one wants a drill; what they want is a hole. Right? And I think the challenge is that everyone thinks of AI as the drill, but they don't really want a drill, right? They don't want a tool. They want what it can do. But the challenge is that I think a lot of people don't understand what the actual possibilities of what AI can do. So that's one side of it. So, and there's no expectation that they should, right? Like, if you're a doctor, you're really good at medicine. You're not spending all your time thinking about AI like I am,
No.
right? Where you really think about the implementation.
Yeah.
But I think there's also the challenge of the resistance to change,
Yes.
right? And I think
Especially
that,
with the medical industry.
yeah, I mean, there's the fear of on the one hand, like, are they going to take over our jobs? Which I am very, very skeptical that they will,
Yeah.
that the AI will.
Yeah.
The other thing is that I think a lot of people have a need to understand what the calculation or it's also often called a black box is doing.
Yes.
But the problem is, right, or not the problem, the challenge is that, if you look at, I don't know, 8,000 data points on an Excel document, you might be able to make sense of them. Maybe
Yes.
even 80,000 of them I could turn into a data visualization. But when you get to 80 billion data points, which is oftentimes what we're dealing with when people say big data, to be able to get the machine to understand it, we have to apply all these advanced statistical and computational models.
Yes.
To try to make those interpretable by a person is incredibly challenging. But
Yeah.
humans have the need to be able to understand why things are happening.
Yes.
And I think that being able to start to, oftentimes the why means that you have to go through a very long explanation of what statistics is, about a long explanation about how algorithms work, a long explanation about, and like, we go to, I mean, I went to a graduate school to understand this. So like, that is actually where the explanation lays, and it's very hard or very challenging to convert those explanations into something that is digestible, that
Yes.
doesn't start using generated adversarial networks and using those terms, and then if people don't understand that, then it makes it even more challenging. So I think that those are two of the challenges. I think the other challenge is the data challenge, right?
Yes.
And I think we're really starting to overcome that. We're really making strides. I think also as people become more reliant on AI and realize how much AI is impacting their lives on
Yes.
a millisecond by millisecond basis, and that people are trusting it on a regular basis. I mean, like GPS, right? You
Yes.
trust GPS,
Of
right?
course.
Right. So like,
I don't know what we'd do without it.
well, I mean, we had paper maps,
We
right?
do, but it's not as
So
easy.
correct, agreed.
Yeah.
And that's exactly the point, right?
Yeah.
If we start to think about that as easier, then and making our lives better by automating things or assisting us or analyzing, really accelerating, or what the most important one is, really augmenting our lives, which is what things like our cell phones do and GPS does. And right, like, think about self-driving cars, and now you don't have to handle the wheel. You can do work and whatever you want to do or read or whatever it is that you want to do in your car, instead of worrying about paying attention to the road. And like, when I tell people about that, I can often see that, like, that fear that goes in their face, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's this
They
visceral
go as
reaction.
white as a ghost, some people.
Correct. But the
And
thing
it's a
is that
trust thing. It's a trust thing
it's
because
totally a trust
people,
thing.
yeah,
But you trust a lot of the AI that you're using today, right?
exactly.
You trust the GPS. You trust your phone to give you the right answers. You're trusting things, and as we move forward in time, it's just a matter of getting individuals to trust that. The challenge is that the most skeptical people are scientists and doctors. They're the
Yes.
most skeptical, right? Of
Yes.
all of all, and rightfully so.
Yes.
And so I think that's also a big challenge in this. So you're also like, you're not only dealing with the really high skepticism of very well trained individuals, but you're also dealing with the general skepticism of humans and trusting technology. And it's going to take time, but there's a if you there's a great quote by a general, Eric Shinseki,
Yeah.
who says that if you dislike change, you're going to dislike irrelevance even more.
Yes.
And so if we don't embrace this change, if as individuals we don't embrace the change, right?
Yeah.
Or jump in with it, it's going to come. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when.
Yes.
And so it's really
Exactly.
about trying to embrace the change to maintain one's relevance and be part of the innovation rather than resistant to it.
Absolutely. So just a quick note. If the recording runs out, then I'm just gonna have to send you another request, if that's okay. Sorry,
Yeah, no
because
problem.
yeah. So I want to speak around leadership. So as you have had many leadership roles, and it is a very big subject currently, what would you say makes your leadership different and unique? And what do you think the biggest issues are regarding the lack of leadership um, at both a company and global level? And what do you think needs to happen to change the current narrative?
Wow. So I mean, like, I don't think I'm all that unique as a leader. I mean, I think that for me, what I try to do is I always try to improve as a leader. I think that, leader really sets a leader sets values and communication, and I think that from my perspective, a leader provides, especially in the field that we're in,
Yes,
the ability to innovate, right? The not the ability, like the space to innovate.
yes,
I think constant communication, constant feedback, making team members feel like they're winning, or helping them feel like they're winning. And I think the most important thing is um, providing a sense of ownership
yes,
to every member of the team, where they don't feel like they're an employee. They themselves feel like they have the ability to make decisions um, that influence the organization, and that their message or their thinking really drives the advancement of the organization.
yes,
Um, because to me, like, for me it's different. Like, there's management philosophies and there's leadership philosophies, right?
yes,
And so I think that we really need to be able to we really need to be considerate of our, as an organization, our only natural resource is really the hard work of our team members. And so you know we providing positive reinforcement, we can really lead people through various periods of time and have them pay attention to really new activities, and make the interest of the organization, really by keeping the interests of the organization and the interests of the team members, and making those things inseparable,
yes,
right? Now, I really think that leadership is something that's exercised when we have motives, when our motives, or the motives of the individual who's a leader, are able to really mobilize and arouse and engage and satisfy the motives of those people who are being led. And we do that. I do that. I try to practice that by elevating our team members, inspiring them, uplifting them, um, exalting them, and like, and just by simply paying positive attention to team members and their productivity, and seeing failure not as something that needs to be chastised, but something that needs to be celebrated,
yes,
right?
absolutely.
Because if you're not failing, it means you're not doing,
Yes,
right?
exactly,
um yeah.
exactly. Um, so AI is very controversial and not well understood, as you mentioned earlier in the conversation, by the general public. So can you please share with us more about AI, the benefits of AI, and how those developing within this technology have the responsibility to use these wisely for the betterment of society?
I mean, I'm very hopeful that people will use AI for the betterment of society. I think that, you know, like I think there's a couple, there's some fears, right, around AI, right? One is
Yes,
that like robots or AI is going to take my job.
yes,
Um, and, you know, job loss is a distinct possibility, right?
yes,
You know, but also like advancement's going to happen, right? If you were you know, horse and coach driver back in the 1930s, you're probably out of a job pretty shortly thereafter, right?
yes,
Um, and that's because of the Industrial Revolution changing our modes of transportation. Technology is going to advance, so we either, as organizations, try to find ways to engage um, our team members to be able to educate them in novel ways or novel, not the new generation of jobs that are coming, whether it's coding or you know, robotic maintenance or whatever those jobs are going to come along the way. Um, so that's one thing. And we think about, like, you know, I think about all the ways that AI can either automate or assist us, or it can augment us, augment the way that we behave on a daily basis. I think that there's a necessity. There's a big challenge in this space, which has to do with data bias.
yes,
So data as a whole, right, is produced, right, and that's what's trains our models. I'll tell you two examples of where bias can come into play and where it can be a very, really big challenge.
yes,
Um, I was told a story about this company that was teaches computers to read scans and like X-rays, CT scans, things like that. And you know, the model was trained on existing scans, and that's how it learns, right? It learns based upon existing scans and those outcomes of those scans. But it was having the algorithm was not working well in hospitals in St. Louis, Missouri, which is in the United States.
yes,
And St. Louis is actually one of the murder capitals of the United States.
yes,
So, which means that there's actually a lot of people with a lot of gunshot wounds and gunshot experiences. And so, because the organs move from gunshots, the machine couldn't actually was actually making a lot of mistakes. So they had to retrain the model. So it was bias. There was bias in the algorithm.
yeah. So, what would you say some of your career highlights have been?
I've had actually a lot of them. I've had a pretty diverse career.
Yes,
Um, I was a waiter. That was probably my first job, or I wasn't actually in the hospitality industry. I wasn't just a waiter. I actually tried to learn every job in the restaurant, and I actually did everything from busboy, dishwasher, all the way to restaurant manager, and worked in the kitchen and everything. That was a really great learning experience for me because I learned how to talk to people. I was forced to talk to a new group of people every few minutes.
yes,
Then I started my own company when I was in my early 20s. And I think, you know, like being able to do that very early age and being able to accomplish something at that age was pretty spectacular. I was a fairly successful nightclub DJ for about a decade. And there were some big highlights there, playing on some of the biggest stages and like to lots and lots of people, and just making people happy with dance was actually something that was a big highlight for me. I think more
that's
recently,
amazing. So it's complete parallels to what you're doing now.
yeah, it really is. I mean, like I think about it is that I'm like always really trying to help people. You know, you think about the fact that, like, you know, for those people who like to dance, and when you're dancing, you're not thinking about the rent that's due, your
No,
relationship problems. Everything sort of fades away into the dance. And really, to me, that was what I was always trying to achieve when I was doing that. It was really like, if I can make people dance, I knew that I was making them feel free.
yes, and also it unifies people. It brings, breaks down age barriers, race barriers,
Correct.
all kinds of barriers.
Correct. And so it's just a sort of a moment to celebrate life. I mean, there's a lot of actually data science going on in DJing, which I didn't really figure out until I became a data scientist. So
Yes.
And I think being able to impact people's lives, not just in the idea of medicine, right? Creating medicines, but
Yes,
also like impacting our team members. Um,
absolutely.
a lot of individuals, you know, like they have these really great technical skills. Um, and I mean, I'm not trying to fault any of what the other companies are doing, but right, like it's really highly trained PhDs in some of the most advanced technologies, and they're just selling more clicks.
Yeah.
You know, like, and so,
And there's
uh,
no personal connection.
yeah, agreed, totally. And I think that being able to provide that not only like, you know, I think everyone's sort of looking for the purpose in life.
Yes,
I think it's part of what people look for. I think part of it, they try to find meaning. And not, I mean, that purpose is something that we created for ourselves and why we created our company, but being able to share that purpose with others as they join our organization is something that's really important. And I think that sort of when I think about achievements, it's about being able to reinforce purpose in people's lives, and freedom and meaning and all these different things. So, you know, like I don't really think of my, you know, like if you ask me what my career achievements are, you know, you can just ask me on my deathbed,
yes,
because I have more to do, right? Like, and
absolutely.
at that point, I'll be able to make an assessment, right? So
Yes,
come back to me.
exactly. Um, so where do you see the future of medicine and telemedicine and AI fitting together?
So that's an interesting thing around. So if I like medicine and telemedicine, I'm going to try to. I'm going to pick one of those because one
Yes,
is medicine is probably a bit more complicated, but telemedicine is a little easier to deal with.
yes,
So obviously, you know, being able to collect vitals from a patient and you remotely using wearables, also some other features, you know, like that you can get about people that are sort of standard fare for what's happening today in terms of medicine, right? Like your weight, your blood pressure, your temperature, things like that.
yes,
But there's a lot of data that's actually not being collected today that um, that one could now get from an image, because image analysis has just, it's incredible what computers can do with image analysis. So there was a research that came out of California, not, you know, a couple of years ago, that machine could detect skin cancer just by looking at someone's skin, similar to what a doctor would do, right?
yes,
Um, and then also, um, there's some research out there that was be able to like do diagnoses based upon someone's face, like take a look at a picture of someone's face. A computer can do that and sort of make certain types of diagnoses, not all of them, but
no,
certain types of diagnoses. But also, if you think about this from a telemedicine standpoint, and we just were to just jump away to, let's say, even more in the field of psychiatry, you know, like you are talking to you know, you see a friend and you can tell, are they sad, or they, you know, generally tell their emotions.
yes,
So machines are actually getting really, really good at this. And it's used, you know, there's a sentiment analysis is used in text analysis, so you can figure out the sentiment of text, right? But you know, it's easy to convert spoken word into text nowadays. I mean, it happens all the time when you're using, you know, speech to text. It's been around for a while. Um, so if you combine those things, sort of like facial emotions and speech to text sentiment, you can now really get some psychological analyses in ways that are less qualitative and more quantitative.
yes,
And so now you can start seeing how you could apply this to a whole host of things, right? How someone is feeling on a telemedicine. So you're getting these additional feedback information. So if you ever saw the original Terminator, the Terminator had this overlay of what it was looking at and all this data. And now
yeah,
maybe the doctor has this overlay of data that's coming to them about the patient that they're speaking to at the same time as they're having the conversation. That is in addition to their temperature or their pulse, right, or their heart, you know, their, you know, their blood pressure. Now we can collect really lots and lots of information about people that's subtle and often hard to pick up. And the other thing is that, you know, electronic health records when they were established for a pretty good reason, which was to make consistent health records not written, and now you can take them one place and not the other. The big challenge around them is that they created the most expensive data entry workforce in the history of humanity. Like doctors are literally doing data entry, right? So now you also have this capability of saying in real time, as the doctor is pulling together, talking to the patient and pulling that information, potentially like auto-filling these EHRs, electronic health records. So there's a lot of different ways that AI can come into play. And I'm probably just scratching the surface as we really dig down into telemedicine.
Yes, absolutely. So what are the effects of AI on privacy? And I know you did touch on that earlier. There do seem to be some objections by the public, perhaps asking how far are we taking this, and how will this information be stored and protected? And can you share with us more about this, and what your company is doing with regards to this?
So our company per se doesn't actually interact with sort of, let's say, data privacy issues at the moment. We only deal with data privacy when it comes to like our collaborator data. So our collaborator shares our data. We keep it stored. We keep it narrowly controlled. And then when we're done with our projects, we return the data to the client, to the collaborator, unless we have some sort of collaboration agreement where we're able to use the data. So we silo the data. Like we don't put it, we do our best to keep it as well protected as possible. But in regards to privacy, I think that the idea of privacy on the web is probably like something that again needs to evolve. I'm of the opinion that privacy is while privacy seems like a human right, we don't really it doesn't really exist anymore.
No, it doesn't.
And
because
so
people are putting the information out there all the time. So
and oftentimes not by choice.
No.
Right? So if you're driving down the road and there's a camera, or walking down the street and there's a camera, right? Like they're everywhere. And that data can now go on the web, and now people will know where you were. You're like, the dark web is full of every piece of information about me. So if you want to know something about me, you can. And the unfortunate thing is that it's balancing the data that actually needs to be private versus the want to be private.
Yes, of
and
course.
I think that's the challenge, right? The thing is that unfortunately privacy is just it's going to cease to exist at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
Unless you're sitting in a room that's completely isolated from any technology. Like people say my phone is listening to me, and that's why, like I would say it probably is. Right? Like, right? There's this really funny joke that's like why don't you have Facebook on your phone? It's like, because I don't want Mark Zuckerberg listening to, like, my friend asked me, why I don't have Facebook on my phone, and I say Mark Zuckerberg. I don't want Mark Zuckerberg listening to me. Yeah. My friend laughed, I laughed, Alexa laughed, Siri laughed, right? So like it's everywhere,
yes.
So I think the challenge is getting to the point that understanding that we may have to redefine what privacy means on the one side.
Yes.
Because privacy really doesn't exist for so much anymore in the way that it may have in the 20th century. And then once we define it, how do we protect the stuff that really needs to remain private?
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Like what is it, what needs, and defining what needs to remain private, right? So like, because privacy doesn't really exist all that much, unfortunately.
Exactly. So that leads me to the last two questions. What are the 3 key pieces of advice you would give to other entrepreneurs, and what legacy would you like to leave?
Oh, wow. So Give me a second to think about this last one.
No, that's all right.
So, so okay. So the first thing the first advice I would give to entrepreneurs is that, there's a lot of reasons to become an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Working for yourself, making lots of money, right? Like those are reasons to become an entrepreneur, but they're not the best reason to be an entrepreneur.
No.
Right? To be an entrepreneur in a way that gets you jumping out of bed every single day to do the work is to find a mission.
Yes.
A vision of the future that you desperately need or want to create. Because working for yourself isn't going to do it. Making money isn't going to do it, especially when it's hard. And it's hard every day.
Absolutely.
Like, so I think that, like, how do you imagine the future compared to something you're experiencing today? And how will that future serve others? And how do you know that that future is a future that others actually want to participate in? If you can get answers to those questions, you'll be on the right track. To come up with an idea or a set of ideas. The other thing is to find a co-founder. I can't stress how important that is, right? Life is hard. Being an entrepreneur is really hard. Having someone on your team, having a team is so important. And the best team is, right, like, the best starting team is to find a co-founder. And remember, I was talking a little bit about those, like, innovators, tacticians, and, like, implementers, right? Try to find someone that's complementary to you. Don't try to find someone who's doing the same thing. Like, the other thing I could say is that, like, if you're going to do this seriously, if you seriously want to be an entrepreneur, you basically you're not going to have fun for a while, whatever that means, right? Like going out to have drinks.
There's no such thing.
Right. Like, basically all your free time is spent on the business. And it's a thing that a lot of people don't understand, right? Like, if you're working for the weekend as an entrepreneur, you're not working. You're like, no. I don't have weekends. No. Right? Like, people, like, I oftentimes was like, oh, it's a holiday today. I'm like, really? Right? Like, I'm like, what holiday? Because I just don't pay attention to that. The other thing is that, like, come up with an idea and start working on it. It's probably going to be terrible, right? But that's okay, because failure is a fast path to innovation. Other thing is, like, only those people who really attempt the absurd can achieve the impossible. And that's something I think Einstein said. And then the other thing is that, if you don't have an entrepreneurial community around you, or you're not surrounded by people who are entrepreneurial, and it's not easy for you to just jump into that community, use social media. And what I mean by that is that I don't follow like big social media influencers on social media. The people that I follow are people who inspire me to become better. I don't know them, right? Like, but if you tell me that those people, it's 5 people you spend the most time with, I can get a good idea of who you are, right? I try to make sure that I'm spending time with people who lift me up. So these are like Tom Bilyeu, David Meltzer, Ray Dalio. These are people that I follow on Instagram. And I try to keep it pretty limited on, like, those people who reinforce the entrepreneurial spirit in me, because it's hard, right? Like, and then they're just like regular reminders of, like, they're sort of like my posse, right? That, like, the people I surround myself with, in addition to the team that we have at our company, they sort of kind of reinforce that spirit, that notion of how to innovate and how to be better, and like, when the things get hard, how do you deal with that? That's how I actually leverage social media to make that the 5 people, that sort of idea of the 5 people I surround myself with. I mean, obviously I'm surrounded by our team, and they help a lot. but it's a different perspective because we're building that thing together. So when I have those hard days, which I have a lot of them, they're,
Yes.
right, they help. The thing is also coming up with ideas, right? That's
Yes.
really hard. That's a really hard thing to do, right? Because, you look at an idea and like someone came up with it in the 80s.
Yes. And also what problem you're solving, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So, there was this really great book that came out in 2010 called The Atlas of Science by Katie Borner. And she has this really cool, she put in this visual in there that was basically all the research that goes on, right? Like, and it's a really cool circle, right? It's like all the research, right, in the academic fields are sort of connected in a circle.
Yes.
And when I saw that, I was like, man, there's this big blank space in the middle of this circle that is like a connection between these different fields. And if I can figure out how to connect these fields, I may be able to come up with some ideas. And then I could just go out and do like user interface or user experience, or like try do some user experience research, or just the customer discovery analysis. Really, more than anything else, is like customer discovery, not UI UX, because we're not really a consumer company. But if you're focusing consumer, you should be doing some user experience analysis. But doing customer discovery to try to understand, is actually this a real problem? Is this something people really want?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's it.
And then what legacy would you like to leave? I know that's a difficult one to answer.
Yeah, so I don't think I want to leave one. I don't think I want to leave a legacy.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to leave multiple legacies.
Yes.
So like my current, think about my mission, my legacy when I was a waiter was to be like, make sure these people leave this restaurant and want to come back. That was the legacy I was leaving then. The legacy I was leaving when I was a risk manager in insurance was, can I make sure that every single person who works here gets home safe to their family and can come back to work the next day?
Yes.
Because I was doing like safety analyses and preventing insurance claims. When I was a DJ, it was like, my legacy was like, can I make people feel free? That was the legacy I wanted to leave. Today, the legacy is, can I heal just one person?
Yes.
Can we build something that's going to heal just one person?
Yeah.
Right? If we've healed one person, we've done our mission. Obviously, if we heal one person, because of the way that our technology works, we're going to end up potentially healing more than one person.
Yes.
Right? Like, can we do that? But now we can do that at scale, because we're not just one person impacting, like one medicine. Or if you think about a doctor, like doctor has a lot of legacy and they're impacting the patients, and we have a really distributed effect because we can use technology to have a really positive impact on people. And for that, I think is really about the legacy is, can we build technology to have the most positive impact on those who, that need healing and the ones who love them. The next legacy I'd like to leave is like, how can I have a legacy on the place where I'm from?
Yes.
I'm from Florida, which has become the butt of jokes across the United States. That's my home. That's my home. I'm from South Florida originally. And I love to leave a positive legacy on where I'm from.
Yes.
There's a lot of challenges in Florida. The Florida Man story is probably indicative of like the mental illness, where have the oldest population in the nation in terms of like the age. So can we have a positive influence on? Can I have a positive influence on the elderly population? Can I have a positive influence on the? We're a very diverse state, and unfortunately, the way that the U.S. works, it just seems to be, the socioeconomic factors of the way the U.S. operates tends to negatively impact minorities. And so, like, can we do something about with our education system to lift up those who haven't received the same opportunities? Can we transform the hospitality and the tourism industry to be more inviting? And then can we really use technology to advance? Can we use technology to advance to help the state? You think about like how Silicon Valley is and how technologically advanced it is. I really think that that's something that could happen. I want to try to have that impact, whether it's through through philanthropy or through government or whatever it is. And then I think just really having a positive impact on people and giving back as much as possible. And I think my legacy is like help, right? Like we help ourselves by helping others.
Yes.
And for me, that think that if we can instill that into the framework of society, I think it really have a positive impact. So I don't know. I feel like it was a very long.
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for joining us today. And if people want to connect with you, what is the best platforms for them to be able to connect with you?
The best way to connect with me is on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Andrew Satz, SATZ. That way you can communicate with me. I do use Instagram, but generally, like, you know, I just use it as a sort of like a ingestion tool.
Okay.
So, but less as a sort of like a interaction tool. But LinkedIn's probably the best way. So, yeah, that's probably the best way to get in touch with me.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and hopefully we can have you back in the future.
Yeah, I love that, Karen. Thank you so much for having me. It was really great chatting with you. You're awesome. You asked some awesome questions.
Thank you.